Talking About Horses, bringing you closer to some of the best horsemen in the world for tips, insights, and stories. Listen at home, at work, in the car, or in the saddle. This is Talking About Horses. Here's your host, Patrick King.
Hey there, gang. Patrick King here, and I want to thank you for tuning in for episode number 46 of Talking About Horses. Today, I'm pleased to be joined by Jec Ballou. Jec Aristotle Ballou is an educator and trainer based in Santa Cruz, California, solving the confusion, questions, and roadblocks that today's riders encounter while learning to work with horses. She specializes in giving today's horse owners the information and tools they need to develop their horses' athleticism and performance. Learn how to improve your performance with Jec's popular books, articles, and on-demand conditioning schedules. And you can join her for her clinics throughout the U.S. or by visiting her at home in coastal California. Jec, thank you so much for joining me here on Talking About Horses.
Thank you for having me, Patrick, and not to commandeer the conversation, but I want to thank you for doing this whole series this week. It's been so cool. And just the caliber of trainers you've got on, I was like, whoa, I'm not worthy. It's such a great lineup of people. And just the fact that you're struggling with technology, which I'm terrified of to do. Like, I just want to say thank you. And I think I speak for the larger community.
Oh, well, that's awesome. Thank you. And thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening to these. It's been so much fun and honestly humbling, not only for who agrees to come on with me to talk while I fumble through this, technological stuff, but also it's been pretty humbling to see who's listening in from home too. And, kind of thankful for everybody having this downtime that we can all share this.
Yeah, I'm grateful. So what are we going to chat about?
Cool. Well, first, yeah, good. Yeah, I guess we didn't even really talk about what we're going to talk about. So it's going to be just a big surprise as it pops up. But, starting with that or talking about that, how are you doing with this whole COVID-19 pandemic deal? How has this changed life for you? What have you got going on?
It's so day by day, some days I'm like, so in my Zen plays, and other days I am like, the sky is falling. And mostly that's just worry about our industry after this. I just remember being out here in California after 2008, and it was so bleak. People were giving away their horses. People were like just not shoeing their horses for like months. It was awful. And I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to go through that again,
Right.
So, but when I don't fixate on that, all is really well. And I was joking to somebody the other day, because of the lockdown here in California, I asked my groom not to come. And so that means that I've been riding all the horses myself, all 9 of them, which isn't something I've done since my early 30s, And first of all, I'm like, I forgot how much work that was. Secondly, I've always welcomed the kind of non-traditional breeds for dressage. And I was laughing the other day, looking around my barn. I was like, it's like the United Nations here. I've got a Welsh pony. I have a Haflinger. I have my own Andalusian. I've got 3 Icelandics. I was like, this is a diverse crowd. Like, I just had to stop and laugh,
That's awesome.
Which is what I needed. I needed to just be like, oh my God, let's enjoy this.
Yeah. Kind of the motley crew there. Cool. That's awesome. Yeah, it's definitely been a change for a lot of folks. I know you talk about, having the 9 horses to ride, and this has given me an opportunity at home to take in training horses now from outside, which I haven't done for years.
Oh, because you're normally on the road?
Exactly. Yeah, I'm normally 350 days of the year on the road teaching.
Seriously?
Yeah, pretty intense schedule for like the last maybe 7 years or so. This has been a huge putting on the brakes, and taking in those outside horses. And so teaching clinics, as you're not always riding, right? I might ride 1 horse a week, in one lesson when I'm on the road. So getting home and now riding 6 and 7 a day, it's like, whoa, this is okay. I can get back into this. The first day or two, I found out I was kind of ibuprofen deficient, but luckily it was easy to get back into the swing of things. But yeah, it's been a shock for the horses that I'm climbing on, because I had just gotten back from Spain riding at the Royal School in Spain. I'm like, okay, guys, come on, step it up.
I thought, okay.
Yeah. But yeah, it is an interesting time, and I totally get what you're saying, with kind of the roller coaster of being really comfortable with it and then really worrying about what may or may not happen with the industry on the other side.
Yeah, it's so day by day. It really is.
Absolutely. Do you do a lot of video coaching and that sort of thing? Do you have a lot of students that way?
I'm just starting to try to get into that. What I get a lot of is inquiries from people that usually have one of my books, and they commonly are trying to work through something with their horse that's sort of a rehabilitative in nature.
Okay.
So I'll sometimes get I need to work on my interface though. I need to improve it, because typically they just submit videos to me with something maybe a problem they're having. It might be a stifle injury. It might be like a gait abnormality. Like I had a really cool one last week. A woman kind of thought her horse was a little bit lame, and it looked to me like it was just rein lameness. And I just prescribed a few exercises for her to do. And 2 weeks later, or that was 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks later, she sent me a video, and the horse is totally regular in the trot again. It was really cool. So I do that kind of consultation, but I need to set up I know your guests this week, like Warwick and Karen, they've got the whole online thing dialed in. I'm just so terrified of my technology. Maybe one day I'll get over it.
There you go. There you go. Well, afterwards, maybe we'll chat about, I've started using a program for video coaching that's really cool. It lets you talk over the video, and you can pull in other videos, and you can draw on the videos and stuff like that. It's pretty cool. And if I can handle it,
okay,
I know you can handle it.
I'm reassured. And I did just launch an online course, a 30-day conditioning for core conditioning for horses. And so that was a new venture for me, and it's been really well received.
Good.
Because I just found myself answering, probably you find this when you teach, you're answering kind of the same batch of questions over and over. And I thought, well, it might be helpful for people if I just gave them a program to follow for 30 days that covered this material.
Okay.
And people love it. They love those actionable little, just tell me a couple things I should be doing today, and the next day, and the next day. So that's been really fun. I just launched that in February. It was not timed for the coronavirus, but it just sort of worked out to be
timely.
helpful for some people during that time, I think, so far. So
fantastic.
Horizon.
Still open for people to sign on?
What's that? Yeah. And in fact, I'm doing 15% off for Patrick King listeners for a week. And the code is Fitness15 is the code. It's only good for a week. So anybody listening to this show now has the code.
Cool. Awesome. Fitness15. You guys heard that here first. So yeah, that's awesome. Cool. Thank you for that.
Oh,
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'll definitely, I know I was clicking on and looking at it, and I just kind of figured out my schedule for the next, actually, I'm looking at being home here for at least the next 6 weeks now. And I was just telling my fiance, I'm like, I know Jec just released this course. I got to figure it out. I got to sign on and do this because now I've got horses to play with and experiment, every day.
Yeah. So you have new clients' horses, or are they horses that you're training for yourself?
They're new client horses. Yeah.
Oh, how fun.
Yeah, it's super fun.
Don't like to go back on the road.
That come out have been like local students in the area that I've known their horses for a little while and know what we've been working on. And it's so great to be able to in 3 or 4 days work through all the things that we've been trying to do in a lesson every 6 months and that sort of thing. So it's been nice to be able to warp speed. I have one student whose joke, they fill out this kind of like an application, right? When they're sending their horse in for saying what they want to do and what they're looking for and that sort of thing. We've got one student who started the trend. It's Grand Prix in 3, because the first idea was I was going to be here for 3 weeks, right? So she wanted her horse Grand Prix in 3. And I'm like, yeah, let's just leave it at 3. Let's not qualify that. Like, could be months, years, decades. It's cool. We'll get that. We'll nail it.
That's funny. That's an optimistic person. I like it.
Right. Exactly.
Well, that's so good for them. Like, they're going to receive that benefit of what training's all about. It's like when you get your horse all tuned up, it's so awesome. It's like, I always make the parallel of me with my bike. I'm always like, no, I've got it. I'm good. I'm keeping it maintained, And then I actually take it to my buddy who's a mechanic, and he tunes it up for me. And I'm like, I didn't.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it. This is
right.
here to ride now.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, it's so valuable. So, well, cool. Very cool. So, let's see. I want to talk about your books. I want to talk about so many things. And actually, I don't know if you remember, you had agreed to come on to a podcast with me a couple years ago when I first started doing this. I sent you a message. I think it was like through Instagram or something like that.
Yes. And then you went to Portugal. And
Exactly. I actually sent you that message while I was sitting in the airport heading to Lisbon. Yeah.
oh, and I was like, oh, because I have such a spot for Portugal. I took students there for years back in the
Okay.
early 2000s.
Oh, cool.
And I don't know about you, but it was like a pilgrimage,
Oh, yeah.
when we would go and when students would go. I mean, there's just something about the horse culture
Mhm.
in Portugal, Europe in general, but especially in Portugal. I mean, it's the fabric of their lives in some ways, and you just really get the sense that you're entrenched in this deep tradition, and it's like
Absolutely.
it's such a privilege. So when I didn't know who you were, but when you sent me that message and you were going there, I was like, oh, good for you.
Oh,
And
awesome.
then since then, you and I kind of seem to like circle around each other on the clinic circle. It seems like a lot of people who come to my clinics, I hear your name a lot. So it's nice to be able
Oh,
to,
cool. Oh, I hope that's good.
yeah, well, I think it is. I mean, birds of a
Okay.
feather, right? So yeah, it is nice to finally catch up. And I gather that you've been back to Portugal and taken students. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I spend every winter I go there, and now I've added Spain also at the Royal School there in Jerez.
Uh-huh.
It's and actually the way that my clinic schedule is, I joke that it's my second home because it's the longest time I've sat still in one place for 20 years was that first trip to Portugal.
Wow.
So now we spend a month and a half to 2 months in Portugal, and then a week or two in Spain as well every winter. Um, yeah,
Oh,
really, it's just that I'm a princess and can't handle cold weather, so I get out of the
okay.
States,
Yeah.
But it's also, for me, it's a great chance to catch up and get my own horsemanship, my own dressage improved, right? Have somebody really drilling down on me, nailing down on me.
So
But it is fantastic to be able to take students there and have them feel, like you said, the tune up on your bike, right? Have them feel those schoolmasters and then take home to their horses what that actually is supposed to feel like.
yeah, that's wonderful. I'm so glad you're doing that. That's so
Yeah,
cool.
it's a ton of fun for sure, for sure. So let's talk about you. Let's talk about who is Jec Ballou. Tell me about
Okay.
your story. I know you're in California now, originally from Vermont, correct?
Vermont. God's
Cool.
country. Well, it's God's country like 4 months out of the year. I couldn't do it again. And actually, sort of Portugal was the tie-in for how I moved out here. I know it doesn't seem that way,
Mm.
but we started taking students to Portugal every winter. We would go in January to get the
Okay.
heck out of Vermont. And
Yeah.
I fell in love with the Iberian horses. I mean, my parents are trainers. I was raised in a horse training family,
Mm.
but we worked mostly with carriage driving breeds. My dad is a really well-known carriage driver.
Okay.
So definitely we didn't have any illusions come through the barn, a lot of Frisians. But so going over to Portugal was my first exposure to Iberian horses. And I was like, wow, they're so cool. And every year I went back, I was like, oh my God, I want to own one of these. And you look at the price tag, and it's like, oh my God, I don't think I'm ever going to own one of these. And
Right.
then the opportunity came up to move out here to California, which was never in my plan, to train for a woman who was importing Andalusians from Spain, and she needed a residential trainer. So I did no homework, didn't even fly out and meet her. I was like, okay, I'm in, it's me, I'm your girl. And I
Nice.
moved out here, and I was like 18 years ago now. Man, I can't believe it. So the longer you don't live in winter, the more I'm like, I guess I'm not going back to Vermont. I always thought I would just, I'd go home. And now I'm like, I mean, I'm in a t-shirt in February,
Right.
and when you work in the horse industry, you
Yeah.
kind of don't want to have the layers on. The first winter I lived out here, a friend from home sent me I think it was a Christmas gift, a pair of those fleece insulated breeches. And the only time I'm talking about, like fleece on
Oh
the
yeah.
inside. And I
Yeah.
was like, I'm never going to wear these. Like it never gets cold enough to wear them. Anyway,
That's
so I'm
awesome.
still out here. And I published my first book in 2005. That was 101 dressage exercises.
Okay. Yes.
And
Fantastic book. I hear that the USDF calls that critical for every rider to own.
Isn't that awesome?
That's pretty awesome. Kudos for that.
I know. I was like, what? It's so great. And that book has had, I mean, what a life. It's translated into, I think, at least 6 foreign languages now, and it continues to sell pretty well. It's just it's a good resource for people. But my big passion has always been the fitness of horses. And I don't think I realized it was my passion until maybe 12 years ago. I started to like really dial in on how important it was to me, and how much a lot of people are stuck in their training because they're just kind of going about things the wrong way physically for their horse.
Gotcha. Mm-hmm.
So that's just led me down all these avenues of constantly researching and studying everything I can get my hands on, and continuing to try to connect with like-minded people. And I love opportunities like this and this week and what you're doing, because I really believe in trainers collaborating. You know, like, we're not islands. And I have a lot of information and tools to help people with the physicality of their horse, but there are people like Warwick and Karen that you've had on your show that can really speak to horses that are troubled, or sometimes you just have to get through a layer of a horse being emotional before we can talk about how do I fix that stifle. Do you know what I mean? And we all have to work. We got to work together, and I think that there's not enough of that. So I welcome it. I love it.
Cool. Good. Yeah. And that is so important. You know, there's so many layers to it. You know, I tell my students all the time, not only are we our horse's fitness coach, but we're also their life coach, right? So they've got to have their mind in the game, and then we've got to get their body in the game. And it is, sometimes you have to kind of, you know, play back and forth in those layers to get the equation right.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
Yeah.
And a lot of, I don't know about yourself, but in recent years, I mean, I do identify as a dressage trainer. That's my background. It's where my heart is. It's what I'm always, you know, continuing to study. But in recent years, I find myself not putting that term forward as much, because sometimes some of what is interpreted as being dressage is pretty foreign to me, honestly, in today's world. It's not the dressage I fell in love with. And that just continues to fuel my passion for fitness, because I do see a lot of horses that get broken through just either lack of knowledge or poorly applied knowledge. And they're fun for me to help try to fix. But, you know, my heart breaks a little bit every time I encounter one that's like, it doesn't have to be that way. You know, too much repetitive motion, just the way they're kept, a lot of times, the way we've domesticated horses, simple things that can really impair their movement, their comfort, their ability to be your partner, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so much that we do with them that just doesn't suit what they need, right, in real life, in natural life, that sort of thing. So it's our job to compensate for that, right?
Yeah I think so. I mean, I think committing to them is like, I'm going to be your steward, you know. I got your back, and that's a big piece of it. But that's definitely shifted. You know, it shifted for me when I met Manolo Mendez. So I helped organize his clinics when he first started coming to California.
Okay.
And I rode with him for years. Yeah. And so I'd already been in the dressage world a long time. And, you know, I was raised in a horse training family. And so I've been around horses a long time, but nonetheless, I showed up it was his very first US clinic. And I showed up because I saw this poster advertising the clinic. I want to say it was in a coffee shop. It was in a random spot. And the look in his eye, it was something about Manolo's face that I was like, I don't know. There's something about this person. He's wise. And so I had this Andalusian stallion, Lusitano. It was a Lusitano stallion in training, a young horse at that time. And he was really phlegmatic. And I tried some different things, and I just kind of couldn't motivate him. And I thought, let's take him to this clinic. So I show up, and I was one of 2 people at the clinic. Like, nobody knew of him, of Manolo, and nobody cared to look into who he might be about. So I was like, oh my God, this poor guy flew from Australia, and there's 2 here. Oh my God. So I proceeded to go home and like get every horse I had in the barn.
Right.
Opportunity. But he was the first trainer, and this is where things really shifted for me. He was the first trainer. I was unloading the stallion from the trailer, And the next thing I know, here's Manolo, and he's like down on his hands and knees next to the horse, and he's looking at the hoof angle, you know, and I'm like, dude, what are you doing on the ground? You know, we just met. And he's like, he was concerned about the horse's hoof angles. And he says to me right off the bat, I bet he doesn't want to move forward. And I was like, yeah, that's why I'm here. And his feet were sore. The horse's feet were sore. And that was the first time I ever had any kind of instruction where the person was looking at the whole horse. It wasn't like, oh, let's refine this or tweak that. It was, how's this horse's lifestyle, his feet, his mental state. And I am telling you, I just like stopped in my tracks and was like, I need to change how I do things. You know, I need to have a much wider lens here. And so that set me on a particular path, I think, that I hope I'm still finding my way on.
Yeah. How cool.
Yeah.
How cool. Very cool. Well, and that, that idea of the fitness and kind of looking over everything and that sort of thing. When I Facebook stalk you, when I Google you, that sort of thing, it looks to me like you're pretty well into fitness and cross training and things like that with yourself as well.
Yeah, hugely. And that I think fuels my, partly I'm my own guinea pig, but also it really deepens my desire to understand things for the horse and to kind of take a stand. I'm not a big, like, let me put my opinions out in your face, but more recently I have been willing to be objectionable when people are just saying things that are flat out wrong about fitness. And I get why it happens. Like, we're all just kind of repeating whatever our trainers told us, right? Like, that's how you learn. But now I tell people, we know so much more now. We have all these scientific tools now. Like, let's use them. Let's advance our knowledge. So just for example, so to answer your question, yeah, I am like sort of always working out, always. And I run ultra marathons, like 50 milers and stuff. And but as an example, like I'll hear a lot of trainers or riders say, oh, I worked my horse really hard today, just as an example. And I'll say, what are you basing that on? I'll say, okay, that's good to know. What are you basing that on? A lot of times it'll be based on, like, the horse was huffing and puffing a lot, right? And respiration is not a good indicator how hard a horse is working. That's how they shed heat, right? Or sometimes you'll hear, well, he got really sweaty. Again, they're shedding heat. It's not, it's one measurement, but it's not the full measurement. So there's a lot of like guesswork that people put into fitness, and they don't realize it's guesswork because their trainer probably told them, like, hey, go get your horse huffing and puffing, and that means he's had a good workout. Right. I know from myself that sometimes if you're let's say you're stressed, let's say you're sleep deprived, let's say your electrolytes are a little bit off, you are going to huff and puff more, your heart rate's going to be higher more, but that does not mean that you've had the same adaptations from that workout. That the body just knows stress. It doesn't know like workout stress or life stress. The muscle cells just know stress. They don't differentiate between.
That makes perfect sense. Yeah.
So that's part of how me being an athlete ties into my commitment to the horses. And also, like, I feel like sometimes less so. I will say this is less so as people become way more educated, which I've definitely seen in the last 5 years. I think people are just so much more knowledgeable. Absolutely. But I used to feel like I had to go to bat for horses because it would make me nuts, where people would be like, well, he should be able to do this. And I was like, should be able to what? Walk, trot, and canter for 45 minutes? Like, right. Okay. And they maybe had him in a training program for like a couple months. And I'm like, you would never have the same expectations of yourself ever. Right. But somehow you think it's okay to get your horse out and they'd be like, well, it's only 45 minutes. And I say, well, actually, the science shows it takes a horse 2 years to develop the conditioning to walk, trot, and canter in sand footing for 45 minutes without any deleterious effects.
No kidding. Wow. Fantastic.
That's the reality of it. Yeah. You look at mitochondrial density and all that stuff. Unfortunately, it just takes time. That doesn't mean the horse won't offer, because they're pretty generous, most of them,
Sure.
Like they'll do it, but are they making gains? Usually not. They're usually making tighter connective tissue and things like that. But
Okay. Okay.
yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. So it's actually, we were both presenting at Midwest Horse Fair several years ago. Uh,
Oh,
and I was worried I was going to be late for a lecture I was supposed to give. And so I showed up probably about 10, 15 minutes early, and you were in the same room giving a lecture. So I hung out in the back and I was able
oh,
to catch the last few minutes of your lecture. And you were going off and just throwing out these facts and these numbers. And I remember you talking about, I believe you were talking about endurance horses at that point. And you were like, well, if you're riding a Rocky Mountain horse, their resting heart rate is going to be this, and it's going to take you this long to get them to this point. And if you're riding this horse, it's that. And I remember just being so impressed. I'm like, I got to catch up with this gal. She's
oh,
got some information there I need to know. So super, super awesome to be chatting with you about this stuff. I'm loving it. I'm loving it.
oh, cool. Cool.
So when we talk about what you were just talking about there, with people now being more educated about what their horses need, and it's kind of like we said, we've got these things at our fingertips, right? We've got the world of
Yeah.
knowledge at our phone,
Yeah.
in our back pocket, or at our fingertips. I mean, it's easier to find information now, but talking about, oh, my horse should be able to do this, it's only 45 minutes. There's a lot of those fitness fallacies that are out there, right? And I know I've read some kind of in the back of I have your conditioning manual.
Oh, cool. Good.
You're
Yeah.
one of my favorites, your equine fitness book, that sort of thing. Reading some of those, can we touch on some of that? Is that okay with you?
Oh, totally. Yeah. Where I don't want to get too nerdy. So just where should we dive in?
Oh gosh, no, I love the nerdiness. I think that's awesome. So you actually had a list in the back of, I think it was the 10-week conditioning manual. Number one was, you do not sit on the back muscles. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So probably the one who explains this way better than I do would be Dr. Garrett Heuschman. So anybody that doesn't have his If Horses Could Speak DVD should go out and get it. It's amazing.
Yes. Yeah.
But so I'm glad you brought this up, because the horse carries us on its upper contraction ligament system. Like that's what actually supports the weight of the rider and supports the horse's body posture if it's standing around with anything but a saggy back and a high head, which is not what we want, right?
Right.
So it's the ligaments that align the spine. It's not the muscles. But many people, I don't, I like I said, I think a lot of this is changing, but we used to think, oh, you sat on the back muscle of the horse, and that's not true. They should carry you on their ligament system. And there's so many reasons that's important, but one of the main reasons is the longissimus muscle is a locomotion muscle. It's like whole duty is to move the horse forward. And it is not designed to support weight this way and carry a rider.
Right.
It is not designed to have an isometric hold and stabilize the spinal joints. But when the horse is not correctly engaging its body and using its upper contraction ligament system to carry the rider, what happens is the long back muscle tries to take over and help out. Their horses are movement artists. They're like us. They're going to try to get the job done, but usually to the detriment. So what'll happen is that long back muscle, it does get very strong, but it's strong in the wrong way. And it doesn't matter how strong it gets, it's never going to stabilize the spine. It's not highly innervated. There are very, very few nerves that access that muscle. So that's the wrong thing to talk about when we talk about strengthening the horse's back. We need to understand that. I'm on a mission with that.
That's awesome.
And I think actually going way back to Udo Berger, The Art of Perfect Horsemanship, if people have read that, he was a veterinary surgeon, for anybody who hasn't heard of him, and he was also an amazing classical dressage instructor. He wrote back, when did that book come out? Sometime in the late 1800s or something?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Somebody watching this is going to know. It's going to be
right. Exactly. Yeah. We always have awesome.
He wrote that he thought most of the horse's movement problems came from the extensor muscle chain, which is that long back muscle. And the more I kind of walk around thinking about that in my own training, the more I'm like, man, he had that right. I mean, you think of a horse that's like, that they're bracy, either in their jaw, their neck, just kind of pushy on the ground. That's that whole long back muscle engaged, right?
Right.
And that whole extensor chain, there's too much strength in it. So when people bring me a really inverted horse and they're like, my dressage trainer said I need to strengthen his top line so his head's not up in the air. I'm like, whoa, that's the wrong thing to get stronger. It's already really strong.
Yeah,
but that doesn't make a lot of sense for people because of how we're used to thinking about the back. So it's the upper ligament system we want to think about stimulating and activating, and then actually releasing tightness and tension from the back muscles that you're sitting on.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Be fluffy. They need to be engaged, but they need to be fluid.
Yeah, there you go. That's a great way to think about it. Yeah. Cool. Let's see. Number 2 you had on there, and I love this one. His neck down does not mean his back is lifted. But what do you mean? I've been told that the lower the neck goes, the more they lift their back. What do you mean by that?
Do you encounter that? Yeah. I admire like students that are like, I mean, I get it. They're like, I got his head down. Like, whoo, I nailed it, right? I nailed it. And it's like,
check that one off the list. Next tap.
Arguably, it is better than it being up in the clouds, arguably, but it unfortunately doesn't guarantee he's lifting his back. And they're like, oh man, there's like this.
Suddenly it gets complicated.
Exactly. It's like, oh God. Unfortunately, it's not that simple. So there's so much to, that's where the artistry comes in. That's why this stuff's so never ending and I love it, right? I mean, there's the basic nut of, it's good to stretch their neck down. But then there's the complexities of they shouldn't be there all the time in that posture, right? You've got to be able to adjust their top line. And then people are like, well, oh my God, how do you know when to adjust their top line? And that's when the artistry comes in. And that's why it's good to have some coaching. I mean, there is just some black and white information that you can run with, but then there are subtleties to it. And that's why it's never ending. And you got to love that part of it, right? It's what keeps us in it.
Yep. Absolutely. I love my friend Jillian Kreinbring. I don't know if you've met her.
Yeah.
She says, and I'm probably going to botch it because I'm terrible at, remembering word for word what people say, but she talks about posture being dynamic,
Oh, good. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that's so important. Like you said, it's not always should that head be down, right? But when we're, just to give our listeners kind of a general idea, if we're looking at that idea of his neck's down, so maybe his back is or is not lifted. If we're asking our horses to bring their neck forward and down, we'll say forward and down, not just down, right? Yeah. We'll put that little qualifier in there. What might be a couple other things we'd be looking for in that to know that our horse is using himself a little more properly?
An easy thing I look for is, again, kind of drawing on Dr. Gerhard Heuschmann's teaching, is the hind leg of the horse. When it lands, it should land under the rider. So if you drew a plumb line down from the rider, that's where the horse's hind hoof should land when it finishes its stride. And accompanying that is the horse shouldn't be creating a lot of dust. So if you got your horse's head and neck down, then you're kind of trotting around, but you are making a lot of dust around you. He's shuffling his feet. His back's not lifted, because any horse, even like a stock horse that's, pretty bulky, they will have swing in their body. Now that's not the same as like suspension, like a warm blood. But they will have swing, they will have cushion. You won't be making a lot of dust clouds. So that's an easy thing. The other thing I look for, and this is something Manolo always talked about, is the carriage of the tail. It should be softly swinging from hock to hock. A tail that is just static, not clamped. I mean, that's bad, but just hanging there lifeless in the trot, red flag, your horse it's not using its back. And those are really easy things, I think, for anybody to look for and see. And I don't know about in your clinics, Patrick, you must see, I'm seeing a lot of gaited horses in the last 5 years, like such a surge in gaited horses, all kinds of, it's been a learning curve for me.
Oh yeah, sure.
I say the same with them. Like, it kind of doesn't matter what, if it's a foxtrot or if it's a rack or a tolt, that hind foot should at least be landing under the rider. When they're kind of just shuffling under the pelvis, not using the back.
Right, right. And that's a lot to do with the, the physics and the equilibrium, right? If the hind leg isn't reaching, deeper underneath the body, they're not able to carry more weight on the haunches.
It's so true. Like, it's just not going to happen. I mean, you
Yeah.
can learn to sit well as a rider and you can give some good cues and not get the result because the horse like physically can't get there, you know?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, cool. So let's see. One of the other ones that was on there that I loved was 30 days to fitness.
Yeah, I know.
And you just blew that one out of the water already.
I
Right?
know.
Like,
I know.
to get one in the sand to go for 45 minutes.
It's so here's the thing. And this will be a really brief soapbox. So horses are amazing at cardiovascular adaptation. They are incredible. Now that doesn't always translate to their stamina. I believe, and there are these horse versus human races. I believe a human will always outrun a horse. And generally when they do those endurance races, the human always wins.
Really interesting. I haven't
Over
seen
distance. Yeah. We can shed heat way better than a horse can.
Oh, sure.
But horses, you can take a total and science has shown this. You can take a couch potato horse that's like kind of never been exercised. Let's say he's like 6 years old. He's just been in the field.
Okay.
You bring him in the field. You can start with some, lunging and some groundwork. And within 10 days, you can measure huge increases in his cardiovascular adaptation. So that being his ability to shed heat, his sweating response, his recovery, like the quickness that his heart rate will go back down to a resting state after being elevated, his metabolizing of energy to fuel his muscles. They measure all that within 10 days, which is like nothing. If you think of how slow, these poor people that go drag themselves to the gym and they're like, they're months and they're like, man, I don't think I'm getting bigger,
Right.
And so cardiovascularly, horses make quick adaptations. And the reason I make that point is I think that's what a lot of people draw their kind of fitness idea about from the horse, with this whole like, oh, I'm gonna put him with the trainer for 30 days.
Yeah.
There is no way around the unfortunate reality that soft tissue and bone takes at best 6 months to make really measurable gains.
Okay.
There's just no way to circumvent that. I mean, some of the breeds that have more, interestingly, Arabians actually have 2 aerobic enzymes in their systems that other breeds don't have. I believe this is why they excel in endurance. But anyway, some horses make quicker adaptations to soft tissue gains, but the quicker is the 6 months. It takes some of the drafty breeds 8 months.
Yeah.
And I've looked at research from all over. So they're all not just quoting each other. All these different places, UC Davis, University of Alberta Extension, they all come up with the same number, 6 to 8 months to build muscle. The problem is you can start to like see the increase in size of the muscle, right? So you think, oh, man, we're getting fitter, right? I mean, you can see that pretty quick. They lose their fat and you can kind of see his pectorals and you think, oh, he's getting fitter because you can see the muscles. It doesn't mean that they've made mitochondrial density that I mentioned earlier to fuel the muscle, the ability to shed the toxic waste that's built up from doing an exercise of any duration. A lot of people don't think about that. Like, where's that go? Well, it hangs out in the muscle cell, until the muscles get efficient at fleshing it out. And that's what makes a better athlete, is when all those systems become really efficient. So, so it's 6 to 8 months. It really is. But like the horse can make cardiovascular gains in 30. It doesn't mean they're ready to go, do a horse show or something, but they can make measurable gains quicker than a lot of other mammals, for sure, which is really makes them pretty cool.
Yeah, super interesting. Super interesting. So for anybody out there thinking about sending their horse out for 30 days, you got to think really 6 to 8 months, huh?
Kind of modify your expectations. Yeah, I mean, just be realistic about what you're going to get done in 30 days.
Sure, right, exactly.
You can do some things, but
Right. So if it's education in 30 days, that's totally different. Not to say that a horse is fully educated in 30 days, but you can advance, right? You can advance.
Well, it's true. And I think the time is better spent in that 30 days to have the focus be on like alignment and body mechanics, because when you get to the point that you want to work on your horse's cardiovascular system, that changes quickly. You know what I mean? So spend your time working on the stuff that is slow to change and that you really don't want vacillations in fitness throughout the year. We used to think that giving the horse a good chunk of time off was a good idea, like kind of to reset. Now they know that pretty big vacillations in fitness is actually taxing for their metabolic systems. It's not a good, I mean, you can let them down a little bit, but generally advise not to drop below 3 times a week of exercising 40 minutes.
Really?
Or so.
Okay.
Yeah, and especially for older horses, if anybody watching has a horse over 18 years old, like do not let them lose fitness. Like it is very stressful. So an exercise that normally would be aerobically based, meaning you would recruit the type 1 muscle fibers, slow twitch aerobic fibers. When an older horse loses fitness, like they've been out of work for longer than 4 weeks, and you try to like bring them back into it, their body tends to try to recruit the type 2 and 3 muscle fiber, the anaerobic fibers, and it's very metabolically expensive and it's very taxing on them. So the best you can, you don't want to let them, I know that's hard in wintry climates. I feel for people that have ice and snow to deal with. So
yeah, exactly. Well, that's actually, I feel like that's a really great point to think about too, with this whole pandemic idea, right? Because there's a lot of barns. I know of plenty of barns, plenty of facilities, lots of horse owners that aren't able to see their horses. They're not able to go out and work with their horses now. And at this point, what a lot of the world right now is on like a 4-week window right now, and we're thinking, I know I've just canceled everything up for the next almost 6 weeks. So when we have a horse, say that's had a month, 2 months off, what are we looking at time-wise? How long does it take to bring him back to where he was?
So, yeah, assuming that where he was like a, full fitness, horses start to, we call it detraining, at 4 weeks off. And we consider anything less than, 3 work sessions a week to be time off, unfortunately, because less frequent than that, the muscle fibers don't get recruited frequently enough to have a pattern, a habit about it. So they build up a lot of lactate is all that happens.
Okay.
So let's say your horse has been out of work for 6-8 weeks. You want to give them at least a 2-month buildup back to not like a 1 or 2 week. A lot of people think, oh, if they had a base, I'm just going to jump back into it. But unfortunately, you're looking at, probably 2 months build up to get back to the level that they were. Now, that said, a young horse younger than 15 years old is going to come back a little bit quicker. It would take about, if they were off for 6 to 8 weeks, it would take 6 to 8 weeks to get them like really primed.
No kidding.
Yeah. A horse older than that is going to take quite a bit longer.
Okay.
Yeah, quite a bit longer. So if a horse older than 15 or 8, like I say, 18 is kind of the average that they use for all breeds, because some age, better than others.
Okay.
If they've been off for a big period of time, then you're looking at a longer haul. But what I tell people, and if you can't see your horse at all, it's like next to impossible. But I have seen online people like, trying to work on their horse's posture and things like that. And that's what I want people to take away from this is not the time to panic about your horse losing cardiovascular fitness, because they're gonna, and that's totally fine. Because my point is that comes back really quickly.
That
like,
don't
panic. This is what makes me crazy, Patrick, is like people are like, they get to the barn, they're like, oh my God, I only have 20 minutes. They pull the horse out of the stall. Maybe this doesn't happen where you are, but out here in California, this is a thing. And they throw him in the arena loose, and they just start chasing him around. And I'm going, oh, his cartilage. Oh my God. It's like, right? Like, oh my God. But their idea, and it's a good one in theory, is they're trying to, get him as much exercise as they can in 20 minutes. I'm like, take a breath. They're going to lose, they're going to lose their cardiovascular fitness, and that's okay. But focus instead on posture stuff, because that is where you don't want to lose fitness. That's what takes so long to get back.
Yeah.
So maybe you go and you do 5 pelvic tucks, and you walk your horse back and forth over the ground poles for 20 times back and forth. and you do some backing up, some lateral pull flexions, like do that stuff instead. It's what it's going to serve you way better in the long run than and that goes back to what I said in the beginning, which is like people gauge their fitness on, did my horse get really sweaty today? You know,
right. So we're talking about more activation of like those intrinsic muscles.
Yeah, totally. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Awesome. So we just had a question actually pop in. I hope you don't get distracted by me like looking down here. It's not that I'm averting gaze. I'm catching the scrolling of questions coming in. Somebody just asked, is this still true if they're outside playing in a herd when we're talking about them losing their fitness?
When they live outside, like 24/7, their upper contraction system is like kind of naturally kept in a pretty good tone. So that's awesome. The health of their ability to raise their back. That's awesome. That's the best case scenario. Do they maintain their bone density and the pliability of their connective tissue? Absolutely. It's way better than a horse that lives in a stall, for sure. But all the studies that I've encountered indicate that they still detrain. I don't think they can give you a specific number to what extent, but horses that live out, it's just a matter of knowing your horse. Some horses that live out move around a ton, and some don't move around much. And
so their activity level, of course, is going to dictate.
And kind of what herd they're in. Are they like on the move all the time, or is it a calmer herd? But by far, it's way better than horses that live in a stall, for sure.
Okay. Awesome. So is it a pretty consistent 1-to-1 ratio then? You were talking about if a horse has 6 to 8 weeks off, it's going to take about 6 to 8 weeks to bring him back to where he was before that time off?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. That's super interesting.
I know. Sobering, isn't it? Oh my God.
Yeah, right?
When I was a kid, we'd give him a lot of the winter off, and then we'd be like, okay, well, this horse had an awesome base. You hear that, like a base condition. It's gonna come right back.
Right.
It does come back, but it's not like it comes back in the first week,
Yeah, right. Exactly. Well, and that's growing up in Vermont like that, and I'm thinking of a lot of the clinics that I teach are in the New England region. And I grew up in Pennsylvania, so it was the thing that the horses got the winter off, So they'd have 2, 3, 4 months sometimes where they weren't working, and we'd come back in, I don't know, March, and we'd say, okay, first weekend of April, that's our first show. We're going to be ready. We got 20 classes in a weekend. We're going to be riding in, And it's like, man, why is he so wore out at the end of those weekends? Why is he dragging his butt on Monday, And so right there's why, hey?
Yeah, I can relate. Yep.
Yeah. Wild, crazy. So another interesting comment that just came in. I think you're going to love this. So we've got Warwick Schiller listening to us. No pressure.
Oh, right? He's out in my neck of the woods, and I've never met him. Can you believe that?
No kidding. Well,
it's 30 miles from me.
Connecting people is yet another free service offered by Patrick King.
But he kind of travels the world like you too. I mean, you guys are always on the go.
Right. We need to do something together, the three of us.
I know.
Together for something. That would be so much fun. But so Warwick just, not just, it was a little bit ago, he typed in a message and he said, tell Jec, I was in Morocco last year and I got a tour of the Museum of the EFI Federation, and there were 2 of Jec's books in there in French.
Get out. Oh my God. That's seriously cool.
There you go. How cool.
Thanks for that, Warwick. He was in Morocco.
So another like our little side trails there, right? So cool. I love it. So another thing that you had mentioned in the conditioning manual about kind of the fitness fallacies was the considering his age. And so I feel like you've touched on that. Is there anything more that you want to add to that?
Just in terms of I guess, because I do meet people with geriatric horses. I have a couple at my barn. I really admire the dedication to keep horses going through their senior years. I think it's a tough sort of art to figure out when they do start to fade, like when a geriatric horse, it's easy to see like, oh, they're a little arthritic and things, but the important thing to just keep in mind is when horses start to get a little, they show their age with their movement, they're a little stiff, if you want to use that general term. A big percentage of biomechanical restriction has no pain associated with it. There's a cool book called Lameness for Laymen, I think. It's written by a vet on identifying lameness and looking at lameness. And he really spells this out, and it's a pretty cool thing to keep in mind. So things do get restricted for sure. That doesn't always mean the horse is in pain. It can mean they're in pain, but it doesn't always. And so sometimes I think we start putting on our kid gloves and being like, oh my God, my horse is getting old, and backing off like way more than maybe you need to. So just keep that in mind, that when they start to be a little biomechanically restricted, it doesn't necessarily mean you need to treat them as like, you know, a total geriatric at that point. The other thing the other point I want to make is, well, along those lines, that's where a heart monitor can be your best friend. Because if you decide, oh my God, you know, so-and-so, my horse is old and it's too hard for him now to do X, Y, Z. Again, what are you basing that on? If he's getting bulky or something like that, then yeah, listen to that. But if you feel like, oh, he's just gotten slower and you can't ride with your trail buddies anymore, that might be a reality, but put a heart monitor on him, right? Is his heart rate when you're out on the trail, like actually way over 150 or not? If it's not, it's pretty surprising sometimes when you discover, oh, maybe this isn't as hard as I thought it was for him anymore. So get that kind of data. And then the other thing is, like, there's all kinds of movement you can give your horse. And I think sometimes we, students of this, can get really linear in our thinking, like, because you've always done whatever your thing is with your horse and now he's older and you're like, yeah, he's kind of fading. I don't think he's strong enough to do whatever my thing is anymore. Maybe there's just a way to bring a little bit more variety into what you're doing. There's so many different ways you can move the horse. You can ground drive them. You can, you know, hack them out. You can do obstacles. You can do all kinds of, but keep them moving. My point is keep them moving. It is
movement is
so
life.
essential. You know, they might not be moving in a collected frame anymore, but keep them moving.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I want to be respectful of your time. We have a few questions that came in ahead of time. If you don't mind us jumping into those, pretty kind of brief here, kind of quickly. So we've got a question that came in from Lynn. She says, I'm working my way through the 55 exercises book. I'd like to ask about the advantages or disadvantages of raised poles versus poles lying directly on the ground, and when might each be appropriate?
Okay. Good question. I'm really obsessed with ground poles, like really obsessed, for conditioning effects and also for just training movement in the horse, because they are pre-measured strides in a sense. So you put these signals into the horse's neural pathways without the rider interfering. I mean, they're just phenomenal. So to answer the question as quickly as I can, it kind of depends what context Lynn is using the ground poles. Let's say she's talking about walking the ground poles. I set up various patterns of ground poles for walking. I almost always leave them on the ground, mostly for ease of setting them up. If there is something specifically you're wanting to target with your horse in the walk, so let's say scapula rotation, then you would want to raise the poles. I almost never raise them higher than 6 inches. Those are the little riser blocks I sell in my web store. But with poles on the ground versus raised poles, the general difference for me is poles on the ground, you always start there because that is where you fix or resolve any gait abnormalities. So for example, in a trotting horse, the stronger side of the horse is always going to try to pull a little bit more. When you're trotting on a diagonal, it's always going to, you have to have like laser focus to see that, or slow motion, right? So they're always going to try to pull a little bit more with that shoulder, that diagonal. Ground poles interrupt that pattern, so they can't get into that habituated
Sure, because of the space.
So that's just an example of how to fix movement with the poles on the ground. And the horse has to be able to go over the poles on the ground without changing his posture, without inverting or going too low, like be able to hold a steady posture, without changing his rhythm at all from when you approach the poles, and stay totally straight, no wavering. So you have to meet those 3 criteria before you raise the poles up. Okay.
So no change in posture, no change in tempo, and no change in
like
straightness.
drifting. Yeah. So once you've checked those 3 boxes and you think, oh, maybe I should raise the poles up, you absolutely probably should, for novelty, to keep the horse's curiosity going, because now we know those create chemicals that help the learning process for the horse. But when you raise the poles up, you're working more at a muscular level. I think of poles on the ground as being my physical therapy tools, changing movement patterns, stimulating different muscle activation patterns. Poles raised are more like, let's get into the thoracic sling. Let's look at the glutes. Let's work more at the muscle level. But you want to have met the 3 criteria I just mentioned first. Hopefully that helps. I probably just confused her more, but she could email me.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Cool. Very cool. So now, how often would you recommend doing that pole work? You're talking about that being as like your physical therapy. How often, and what length of time, that sort of thing?
I get horses in training that are like a little funky in their movement. That's the best way to describe them. And like I just had a Rocky Mountain horse come 2 weeks ago. He just left today. He was here for 2 weeks. And he couldn't quite get into his gait. It was one of those really pacey kind of, a little bit like riding a camel, So we wanted to clean up his gait with that particular horse. And he's a great example of what I do with a lot of horses that come in for training to get them a little bit more organized in their body. I put the poles on the ground, so not raised. And I would every single day walk him over the poles. And I would set him up a little bit differently every day, so he's not just getting robotic about it, but not wildly differently. Like sometimes they're on a curved line, sometimes they're totally straight, sometimes there's a gap between different sequential sets of poles, things like that. But I would start every single session walking him over those poles like 15 to 20 times, because that gets all the pathways fired up that I want to then build on and ride.
Okay.
When people are working on really like building muscle fitness with their horse or power, and they're like trotting over poles or doing little canter gymnastics, and I usually just recommend 2 times a week for that. And not consecutive days if you can avoid it, but like a Tuesday, Friday kind of a thing would be really good.
Okay. So a lot of the physical therapy side of things you're talking about is just at a walk.
Yeah. Oh my God. There's so much cool stuff. I mean, the more I get into it and test out stuff with my horses, I'm like, oh, wow. Like yesterday, I have this little exercise. It didn't make it in the 55 exercises book. It'll probably be my next one, but just putting a single pole on the ground. And this is from the ground, having the horse walk forward and back across it. And you get this incredible activation of the scapula for horses that are really like, just want to be heavy, or their mouth is just like lead, it's like dead. It's kind of like a reschool kind of thing. But that simple little exercise of the horse pulling its scapula back. Because when does the horse make that movement? Never. Except for a strong galloping horse, you'll get some backward scapular rotation. But most of us don't go gallop cross country. So you don't get that. So that was so cool, just working with a single pole back and forth. I do so many little techniques like that too. I mean, I call it prehab, but it's like physical therapy kind of stuff. And like, if you think about your own training, what I just described with the single pole going back and forth across it, probably when you're in Portugal, you do the work in hand and you move the horse and you get them moving their jaw and you get them light in the front. But Patrick, that requires a lot of like skill and technique. And so what I'm finding with these pole exercises I can set up for people is it just really simplifies things. Do you know what I mean? Like they don't have to have your perfect timing and have all this like, well, I got reins over here and I got this whip and I just hit myself in the head,
Right, exactly. Yeah. All the things.
Getting the same effect. So it's not like we're reinventing the wheel. It's like kind of a different way to come at it to take care of their bodies.
Super awesome. Super awesome.
Yeah.
There was another exercise that you have with one pole. I feel like I need to call you back because I could talk for hours on some of the questions I have and that sort of thing. But there was an exercise that I saw you do with a single pole, and I've had a lot of students do it with horses that are kind of stuck in the shoulders, that sort of thing, where they've got one leg walking on the other side of the pole and the other 3 walking on the near side.
Yes, straddling the pole. Straddling
the pole.
It's so cool. And I have to give a shout out to Linda Tellington Jones. I saw her doing that exercise with dogs, and I thought to improve their coordination. I think it was dogs that maybe were hypermobile or something. I'm probably misremembering that. Somebody in your chat room is going to have the clearer facts on that. But I thought, okay, let's let's give this a whirl with horses. It seems like ridiculous, like nothing's happening here, right? And I started doing it with the horses and was like, what? Like some of the horses would get on the pole and start like having this total release, like they're dropping their head and they're chewing. And I was like, whoa, started to pay attention. And now I've started doing it in all my clinics. And I love when I do it at a dressage clinic because they'll look at me like, we're going to do what? Like that's
right.
dumb.
Right. What's this wacko
And then
do now?
then I try to do it and they can't. And they get all into it like, oh, I'm going to figure this out. And they do figure it out and they see the change in their horse. When the horse broadens its stance and has to pull its scapula back and activate that bottom muscle chain. And as I mentioned before, there's too much strength in the top muscle chain, in my opinion, for most horses. It's like what's going on in that bottom muscle chain, you know, the tongue, the abs, the obliques, those are mover muscles. So,
right.
Yeah, straddling the pole's a fun one. I like when people send pictures of it.
Oh yeah, that's super cool. When I saw it, it reminded me whenever I was younger, I spent a couple months living with Ray Hunt, and one of the things we used to just joke around with each other. It was totally like a college fraternity. Us guys learning to start colts, living with Ray, but we would have the hose coming out watering the arena right down the middle of the arena. And it was one of those hoses that would reel itself up as it went. So we would always race back from lunch and climb on these young colts that might have had 2 rides on at this point, right? And the idea was, could we ride down the hose with the left feet on the left side of the hose and the right feet on the right side of the hose?
No way!
How close could we get to the sprinkler before we got farted off? Which I ended up taking home, and I would guide trail ride clinics down the road, down a main road, and be like, okay, left feet on the left side of the yellow line and right feet on the right side, just as a coordination thing. But man, I tell you what, super fun doing that. And we all found the leak at the top of our saddle. But then when I saw that exercise, I'm like, oh, wow, yeah, because that, you know, not only for the body, but for the mind too, the way that it really, you know, they have to release emotionally in order to get there physically.
Yeah. Oh my God. You were ahead of the time, Patrick.
Well, we were just doing it for kicks and giggles.
Wow.
But yeah, cool stuff. Very cool.
So cool.
Very cool. Awesome. So let's see. I want to real quick on here. Okay. Lori came in with a question. I'd love to ask about my 4-year-old Mustang gelding. I adopted him 2 years ago and he came in some pretty rough shape, bad feet, twisted neck, strangles. I got him straightened out, except that he has a tight nuchal ligament that runs all the way to his croup, mostly sensitive in the mid neck. You can feel it in the pole when he's really tight. He's not happy about body work. It takes him a while to get into it. He wears a back on track sheet. Started his groundwork training. The exercises she's used from your book include crossing over the poles, some of them raised, and she's starting with the backing as he did not seem comfortable doing it before. Let's see, sorry, where did we go? Where did I go with this? He's very high-headed. He hasn't been in work, but he looks like a horse that's been ridden upside down. So his natural carriage, natural conformation, right, sounds like it's to be upside down with a really tight nuchal ligament. She's wanting to know what kind of advice for that.
Well, first of all, I really admire you for taking this horse on and committing to him. It's so cool. It sounds like, you know, you're really in it. Probably, I'm not surprised he's guarded about the body work. Might even hold off for a month or so. A lot of those horses are so protective of themselves, you can't really get in there.
So he's maybe not receptive yet to it.
Yeah, I mean, I would guess. So a tight ligament, I guess I would need a little bit more info, but just kind of going off whatever info we have here, ligaments, you know, their job is to protect the joint. So if that's gotten really rigid and tight, I'm going to guess he was at some point kind of compromised somewhere in his spinal column. So my recommendation would be to keep the muscles. I may not do anything specifically to like fix the ligament right now, but to support the muscles of the top chain. So I don't know how his back muscles feel. Are they like a rock? Are they rigid? Can you just massage them a little bit before you do the back on track. I like to use the back on track blanket sometimes before and after I ride, because sometimes once you've or do groundwork, because once you've moved the blood around and then you put the back on track products on, you kind of get like a double whammy. But I would release, probably, I'm guessing too, this horse is really tight in his glute muscles. And what I do for the horses is I have just it's like for humans, it's a roller, kind of like a rolling pin, and you roll their glutes, and sometimes you just release a ton of tension. But if his rump is like really hard to the touch, I would spend a lot of time loosening up his glute muscles, because that's going to contribute to the nuchal ligament being like, let me be high strung here. I wouldn't do anything to, like, at this point for the next 3 weeks, to like try to bring his head down. I would continue what you're doing with the ground poles, because that does activate the whole core. As the core gets switched on, the neck muscles start to relax and come down. But right now the head is high because he's trying to find stability. His spinal joints are not stable, and they load the spinal joints by bringing them closer together so they can press on each other, right?
Okay.
So, the lower we put the neck and stretch the horse's back, the more open the joints get, which is what we want for movement. But a young horse, a worried horse, a horse that's had trauma, their joints, they stabilize them by pushing them together, and they raise their head to do that. So probably this horse has kind of chronically been that way. So as you can help sort of stimulate the core, turns on the forehand would be a good, simple little thing to do from the ground, as you can do some of that stuff and get these spinal joints to relax a little bit. His neck will start to come down, and then you can be a little bit more proactive about inviting him to come down with the neck. But I wouldn't push that issue for a few weeks and focus on some other gymnastics.
Okay.
Those would be my recommendations without seeing the horse anyway. So maybe that's helpful.
Yeah, cool. Well, and that makes sense as an adopted Mustang, kind of a young horse also, kind of what they go through, where they naturally kind of tend to be on protective mode, that sort of thing. So yeah, makes perfect sense.
Yeah. Who knows what who knows what they had going on before you got them, right?
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Cool. We have a question that came in. Any general advice on stifle strengthening?
Yes. A lot.
Okay.
We always used to say, well, my horse has a weak stifle. And I think what we meant was the joint was a little bit unstable. So the recommendation is always strengthen the quadricep of the horse. Okay. Now, horses are not like us. You can't isolate a muscle group. But we used to say things like, ride them up and down hills, which is tremendous for stabilizing the stifle joint. What I now am really a vigilante about is if and when the stifle is either inflamed or misfires sometimes, like the horse's leg will kind of get caught behind them when you're riding. You feel like, whoa, they kind of slip out. It's almost always working in conjunction with the lower back. Because that whole ligament system comes down, and the two main nerves to the quadricep muscles go through the loin muscle in the lower back. So if there's any tension there or discomfort or soreness, those nerves kind of just shut off. And so you can't strengthen the quads. Your vet's like, hey, go make their quads stronger. And you're like, okay. But if the lower back is tight, you can do the best exercise in the world, and you're not going to see the difference because those nerves are not talking to them. Gotcha. So spend a little bit of time, again, just massaging the lower back, check for heat, that kind of thing. Cool. But then assuming the horse is not totally out of fitness, what can be a terrific conditioner is not super deep sand, but sand that has some depth. So like 3 inches deep of strong trotting for about 10 minutes. You don't want to overdo it. And again, you're not going to do this with a horse that hasn't been in regular work, but let's say he has. You could do about 10 minutes. I'd do that twice a week. It's like real strong trotting and like 3 inches of sand. That's terrific for strengthening the stifles, as well as hills. But hills, what a lot of people don't realize is slow, controlled movement up and down hills is what strengthens the stifle. If you trot up a hill, a horse uses his glutes pretty much to, push himself up the hill. He's not getting a lot of joint flexion and taking really deliberate weight on the stifle. So slower is your friend.
Gotcha.
If you live somewhere that you have hills, and when people are somewhere really flat and they don't have hills, then you just have to do more cavaletti is what I tell people.
Okay. Makes perfect sense. Makes perfect sense. Yeah. Cool. Cool. Well, and the slower is better makes a lot of sense when we think about riding and helping our horses to balance, right? We would say
Yeah.
we've heard Carlos de Kunfi say for years, speed is the enemy of impulsion, right? Or speed is the enemy of balance, which makes perfect sense because the muscles you're talking about activating again are the intrinsic muscles, right? That need
Yes,
to be
and
activated.
I was thinking of DeCunfi this morning because he wrote that great article on Dressage today. I want to say it was like 99 or so. It was a long time ago, but it was on like the pony trot that Podolsky used to talk about doing for horses to warm them up, like this just real slow jog trot to try to activate those intrinsic muscles. So I was out in the field this morning riding my horse and I was working on the pony trot and it just felt really good. And I was like, there you go, DeCunfi. Yes. No, the pony trot. That's so funny that you bring him up.
That's awesome.
So again, slow, controlled, but again, not like forever, like, right? Like that's just an exercise. And once you get that all recruited, then it's like, okay, now let's go. Let's get some power. Yeah.
Cool. Cool. Awesome. Okay. I know we're going to have more questions. I know we've had some more questions pop in as we've been doing this live, but I want to, again, be respectful of your time. We're just going to have to chat again. That's just
okay. I would love to chat again. That would be so fun. And I love people's questions. Like, yeah, it's so much fun because everybody has such unique challenges with their horse, you know, it's so many of these little body things. It's like, I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. Cool. So some wrap up questions here as we go into closing. So what would you say, what would you give as an actionable tip or thought for riders? Something that they can ponder if they can't be with their horses, or something they might be able to work on with their horses today?
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Man, I should have prepared more. Besides watching your show, you mean, Patrick?
Oh, yeah, of course. Besides, yeah, naturally.
Yeah, an actionable thing that you can do if you can see your horse is I'm on a little bit of a like a kick about this, is make sure you do spend the first 10 minutes of your session walking. Doesn't matter if you're doing groundwork or you're riding, but that's how long the joint fluids need to circulate. So do use your watch, don't guess. I know a lot of us who consider ourselves to be like artistic riders don't look at our watch, but I do when I get on the horse, because otherwise I shortchange them. Everybody does. You're like, I think that was 10 minutes. And you look at your watch, you're like, oh, it was 4.
4, yeah, exactly. Right, right.
Joint
And that's about the circulation of the synovial fluid, yeah?
Exactly, yeah, it becomes thinner. Okay. And then the joints can, so that's why I was cringing about cartilage earlier. Because if you don't get to that state where it's lubricating the joint, the cartilage bears all the brunt of that, like rapid running around the arena or turnout. And over time, yeah, it really degrades because cartilage doesn't repair very well.
Right, absolutely. Cool. Okay, awesome. What is a recent book that you've read or video that you've watched?
Horse related or no?
Anything.
It's kind of horse related, but I read a very great book recently. I'm a big reader. It's called The Giver of Stars, and it's based on a true story that I'm surprised I never heard about. It's based in Kentucky.
Okay.
And it takes place between the years of 1945 to 1952, I think. And it was a horseback library service. And it's based on these true characters who were these like really mighty independent women. And they delivered books by saddle to these Appalachian homes, like really hard to get to. It is a delightful story. The Giver of Stars. It's a great read. It's just so, a lot of little horse anecdotes and strong female characters. So that was great.
Awesome. Cool. Very cool. What is something that the horse has given to you?
I think my whole life. I mean, horses have taken me around the world. That I've met so many cool people. Like they've really given me an identity in my life, and I just am so grateful.
Awesome. Very cool. Let's see. And we touched on this early on here, but this is a constant journey of discovery and improvement. What area of your horsemanship or self-development are you working on right now or wanting to improve?
In this moment, like today, I'm working on being very picky about myself because I am, like I say, I'm not doing a ton of lessons right now because of the lockdown. I'm trying to get so quick about my timing of my aids, get in and get out and get really sharp on that. And the thing about it, partly it's my nature as a human is I'm a Libra, I'm a lover, I don't like confrontation. And so my fault as a trainer has always been like, I'm a very light rider, very sensitive rider, but the downside of that is sometimes if a horse is kind of blowing me off or whatever, I'm not quick to get in there and be like, pop, 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 and get out. I'm kind of just going to feathery light through this. And as you know, it's not the right thing. So I've been kind of pleased with making some progress in the last year with being a lot more effective. Okay. I remember as a young rider, my mom used to be like, well, you can be a pretty rider or you can be an effective rider. And it was kind of like, yeah, you can sit there and look like a statue, or you could actually, work with your horse.
Right.
So keeping that in mind, trying to be more effective.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Very cool. I had one of my coaches I ride with as often as I can, which is like once every couple of years, Julio Mendoza, dressage rider outside of Tryo, North Carolina.
Yeah.
He said to me once, he was still living in Maryland at the time, but I think it was like 5 minutes into the warm up or something. And he says to me, you can't just sit there like an effing princess. I thought you came here to ride, But yeah, so same idea, right? You can be pretty or you can be effective, right? But the trick is, can we be both, right?
Yeah. I know. It's an ongoing quest. I love it. It's addicting, apparently.
Right? Exactly. Cool. So let's see. This one is always fun for me to hear the answer to. If you had a giant billboard advertisement for the whole world to see, what would be the message that you'd put on it?
Oh, I think in this moment it would be smile. I think
there
changes
you go.
Your whole outlook, right? And you smile and you feel like, hey, yeah.
Perfect. Good. Okay. This has been so much fun, Jec. How can people find you? If they want to find out more about you and what you're doing and where you're at, how can they find you?
They can go to my newly revamped website, which is pretty exciting.
It looks pretty cool. It's really great.
JecBallou.com. And as I said, all my books are there, but my online course that I just launched is there. And the 15% off code is fitness15, and it's good for a week. And I'm just announcing it to just Patrick King's audience. So
awesome.
Like a VIP pass. So yeah, that's the best. And I'm on Facebook too. It's just my name, Jec Ballou. So
perfect. Awesome. Cool. Well, again, thank you so much for this. I'm glad we finally were able to put that. What was it? 3 years now we've been working on putting this together.
I've heard your name so many clinics, Patrick, for real.
Oh, cool. That's awesome. And likewise. And I've shared your books. I've got all of them, and I know that half of them are out on loan right now and that sort of thing, because I'm terrible with doing that. I lose track of things. So I know I was looking actually for your equine fitness book and found 2 or 3 copies of it, because I end up loaning one out and then I'm like, oh, where did they go? I'll just buy another one, But yeah. Good.
I hope people are using them. Cool.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So fantastic stuff. Looking forward to catching up with you again. Definitely going to have to schedule another one of these. So awesome. So thanks so much.
For sure. Okay. Well, thank you.
Cool. You bet. Thanks so much. Hey, gang, I want to thank you for tuning in for episode number 46 of Talking About Horses. I really appreciate you giving Jec and I your ear for this time. Please remember that if you've missed any of it, you can access the full broadcast through Facebook, eventually through YouTube, iTunes, or by streaming directly from my website by accessing the Talking About Horses page from the education drop-down menu. Through whatever platform you're listening, please be sure to give us a rating, comment, a review, and hopefully a share with your friends. Thanks so much, gang, and tune in next time.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Talking About Horses with Patrick King. If you enjoyed today's show, please leave a review and subscribe. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit pkhorsemanship.com. We'll catch you next time.